Good morning. How's everyone?
Yeah.
Well, that must have been a really bad solo. They're leaving already. How's everybody feeling?
Excellent.
So today, because I have to make a distinction because I'm doing something this afternoon at 2 about the drums and the bass, but today, this morning, we're going to talk about some things that I think are important, but I really want this to be an interactive session. So first of all, this is Troy, right? So anyone who can tell me the name of that song that I just played, Troy's gonna give you $1,000 cash.
High five. It don't mean a thing if it ain't got that swing.
You better know it. Give them that money, Bitcoin. All right, so that's kind of a theme for today, because from my understanding, there's looks like a lot of high school kids here, some college-age students, and I really want to talk about some of the basic functions of what it is that we're supposed to do. Now, I am fully aware that for some of the younger folks, this is just like an old guy talking about some stuff that's outdated. But at the end of the day, I always tell my students, when you play, there are 2 questions that you should have on loop. How does it sound and how does it feel? And if the answer to either of those questions is anything other than amazing, your next question is, what do I do to make it sound and feel amazing? Sound and feel are 2 very, very different things. And I know that for drummers, we want to chop out, we want to do all of this stuff. But at the end of the day, if you want to be a working musician, if you want to be someone that someone wants to play with, you got to find a way to make it feel good, and you got to find a way to make it dance. It's a big part of what we'll talk about this afternoon. But at the very foundation of that, for what a drummer needs to be able to do, is to have a very personal and close relationship with the ride pattern. And I know that a lot of drummers, one of the challenges that we have, I always say that we all have a job to do. And either we're playing the melody or we're supporting the melody. And if we're not doing that, we're probably getting in the way. And a lot of drummers, we get in the way because we don't know the melody. And so one of the things that I'm going to recommend that how many drummers do we have in here? Great. How many percussionists do we have in here who just happen to play drums? I love asking that question because it freaks people out. Well, what does that mean? I'm a percussionist. Okay, but at the end of the day, you got to be able to make this thing dance. And part of what we need to be able to do in an ensemble, how many of you all are playing in your school ensemble, right? So you need to be able to play that ride cymbal and sing the melody to every song that you have. So the entire time that I'm playing, do, 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 do. What did you notice?
Yeah, nice.
Even though you were laying back with the melody, the ride pattern didn't change at all.
Yeah, so as simple as that seems, I can't tell you how difficult it is for some people to do that. And I have this principle, which is everything complicated is a compilation of simple things. It simply means that anything difficult, anything difficult is a bunch of simple things put together. So you got to master the fundamentals. Now, it would be really easy for me to do. Now, there are many times when I do that, but there are other times when I know I just need to lay it in the pocket. But when you talked about the phrasing of my singing, I'm always playing with someone when I'm playing, right? I always have this virtual band going on. But in my head, I am trying to hear phrases that will emulate the type of phrasing that of someone that I'm playing with. So if you notice, I did not do this. Da, ta, 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 ta. So I hope to never play with anybody who plays like that. Right? So a lot of times when you play with people, that phrasing, there's this elasticity in the phrasing, right? And so we start talking about time. One of the things that I always say is that time has to be felt more than heard. And so a lot of times, and this is something, again, we'll talk about this afternoon, when I have problems playing with bass players, it's usually not because I can't hear them, it's because I can't feel them. Now, when we talk about drums, quite often with drummers, if you're in your ensemble, if you're in a lesson, you're working on some piece of paper on your stand, and I'm being very careful with my words, because normally when we see something on the stand, what do we call that? That piece of paper, what do we call that? A chart or don't be a lead sheet or what else? Don't be afraid. Huh? Who said that? Say it loud. Music. Hey! Everybody agree, right? That's not music. It's just a piece of paper with letters, numbers, lines, and dots on it. Ain't nobody coming in here a piece of paper play. They come in here music. It doesn't become music until we breathe life into it. So one of the things that I'm really a big proponent of for us as musicians is to own the music, to own that process. And once we start to do that, that's when it becomes music, right? So one of the things that I like to talk about, and this is really important, is what I call areas of focus. So what is that? These are the things that you have to be mindful of when you play. So we all know about time, right? One of the things that I think about all the time is when I'm reading, is to never make it sound and feel like I'm reading. For example, if I were to give some drummers that melody to play, and it doesn't mean a thing, this is what I would hear. And immediately I'm saying, oh, it sounds like you're reading. Because the question is that how you would play when you're playing with other people? Hopefully no. Yes?
What is missing is the dynamics.
Well, there are dynamics there.
Well, mostly on the snare.
Mm-hmm.
When you're playing it sometimes around the kid, like you're not supposed to, like little soft and then add some.
So speaking of dynamics, it's not just about dynamics, it's the balance of the dynamics. So for instance, if I play, it doesn't sound like I'm reading. And quite often, the big culprit is the bass drum. You know, so quite often in high school bands, even in college bands, many of the directors that you have are not drummers. So they have a difficult way of being able to communicate on a high-end, challenging level that we all exist, right? Y'all supposed to agree with that. So many times they can't tell you what to do as drummers. They'll just say, oh, well, do something, well, like what? I don't know, just a boom tick, what I say. So they can't really describe to you what it is they need from you. So as a result, no one ever talks to you about the balance of the bass drum. But not only the balance of the bass drum, but the balance between all the rudiments, right? So again, one of the things that you all can practice is playing that ride cymbal and singing the melody to every single song you're going to play. And that's going to be the beginning steps to really owning that process, right? Now, as drummers, we have to understand where is it that we primarily live, metaphorically speaking. If you're playing time, you play drums?
Yeah.
Okay. So if you're playing jazz, where's your focal point?
On the ride cymbal and hi-hat.
You sure?
Well, those are the constants,
That's the constants, okay.
typically.
You don't believe them, do you? Where do you think it is? Okay, let me try to help you guys out a little bit. My wife tells me, okay, babe, one day a week you gotta be nice. Just one day, you just start there. So this morning when I talked to her, she said, okay, babe, today's the day. So because of that, I know none of you guys know my wife, but wives have a way of finding stuff out. So just in case, I'm gonna give you a hint. So where's your focal point? The bass drum. Say it loud. Say it proud.
Bass drum.
No, I hope not. I hope not the bass drum. I'm not sure why you said the bass drum, but you were right. Ooh, you let me get you, right? Because we just already talked about the ride cymbal in the melody, right? So, but again, if we're talking about the ride cymbal being a focal point, one of the things that's really, really important is for you guys to develop a very personal ride pattern. And without going into too much detail, every ride pattern has a shape to it, right? If I wanted to play like Philly Joe Jones, they're both quarter note focused, right? But Jimmy Cobb plays into the cymbal, whereas Grady Tate will play off the cymbal. Now, I'm probably saying some names you guys are like, I don't even know what that is. You better write it down, because you need to know. Elvin Jones has more of an angular ride pattern. Now, why is this so important for us as drummers? So that we can meet the music where it is. You never want to be in a situation where you're forcing yourself on the music. And so one of the first things that I do when I'm playing with someone is to try to figure out where they're coming from conceptually. You know, the soloists, who have they been influenced by? If you're a saxophonist, is it Dexter Gordon? Is it Coltrane? Is it Hank Mobley? Is it Joe Henderson? And one of the reasons that I ask those questions so I can try to have a conversation with you. Here's the thing, when we play music, it's all conversation. So when we start talking about areas of focus, part of this also goes to being able to think about how to recreate conversation. Every time we play with someone, it's conversation. So in order for me to be able to have a conversation with you, an intelligent conversation, I need to be able to try to figure out where you're coming from and what interests you. Because you don't want the conversation to be all about you. It's like, how you doing? Oh, I don't really need to know, just tell you how I'm doing. That's like, no, I don't really want to have that conversation, right? But if I can be engaging with you, you're going to open up, and I'm going to find out a little bit more about you, and I'm going to be able to make you comfortable, and I'll be able to get more out of you, and then the conversation becomes more engaging. Now, that seems like we're not even talking about music, but we are, right? So if we're talking about being able to find out conceptually where a person's coming from, goes back to why is this ride cymbal so important and all of these different shapes of the ride cymbal, so that we can then try to create an environment that's going to help that person make the music dance. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So I'm going to talk about a few other things here, but we talk about areas of focus, time, balance, dynamics. One of the things that is really, 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 really important to me, for all of us, is to be able to play the instrument well. And I'm kind of a rudimental kid. I grew up playing in drum and bugle corps, and I love marching bands. And some of my early heroes were really technical geniuses, like Buddy Rich, Billy Cobham, and Harvey Mason, and Max Roach, and Philly Joe Jones. But all of those guys played the instrument really, really, really well. Philly Joe Jones worked out of Charlie Wilcoxon books every day. You know, and every time you play something, it's either a rudiment or part of a rudiment, right? So I asked the gentleman, you know, when I came to New York many years ago, there were a lot of people who used to hang out, who weren't really musicians, but they knew a lot of musicians. Older people who, they knew Charlie Parker, they knew Dizzy, they knew Monk, okay. So there was a guy who used to hang out, very dapperly dressed guy, on the set of drums, okay. So, you know, I would see him every now and then, we would talk. And so one day I said, let me engage him a little bit. I want to find out what he really knows about the drums, right? I knew he owned some drums, but I said, what do you practice? He said, singles and doubles. I said, oh, okay. That's all he said. A few minutes later, I said, it's gotta be more than that, man, come on. So I said, man, so when you're at the drum set, you're trying to work some stuff out, what are you working on? He said, singles and doubles. A few minutes later, I'm like, okay, this is getting to me, so. I figured maybe he didn't want people to hear because people were walking past. This went on for about 20 minutes. As I said again, so listen, man, when you're trying to, you work, he said, Carl, you're looking for another answer. but everything you play is a single, double, or multiple bounce. I'm like, nah. His name is Max Roach. Well, you don't gotta believe me, you might want to believe Max. Right? And I went back and I listened to some records with him, with Clifford Brown and some other records, and I was like, God, dog, you're right. And again, it started to reinforce the concept that everything complicated is a compilation of simple things. So Max would take a figure like maybe just straight 8 notes or 16th notes, but it didn't sound like that because of how he shaped those rhythms. Accents and dynamics help to shape phrases, which help give the music personality. One of the things that I use as a warm-up, we can talk about warm-ups in a second if you guys have questions about that, is something that I heard Philly Joe Jones do, and I could not figure it out for the life of me what it was. And it was a 2-bar phrase, which was Troy's got another extra $1,000 he's gonna give the person who can tell me what that was.
Singles and doubles.
Well, everything is the same with double. One bar paradiddles, another measure, 5-stroke roll, 5-stroke roll, double, double. Right? So, depending on your mindset and how you see some of this stuff, will determine your approach. Because if we see this as all just an exercise, it'll never become music. Right? So one of the first things that we all have to do is to master these rudiments. And so because you're gonna play a rudiment whether you know it's a rudiment or not. So my thing is I need to know what it is that I'm playing so that I can try to find a way to do something with it. So once I understood that, wait a minute, it's just a bar of paradiddles. And so part of my process in terms of working on language and vocabulary is to find that thing that really challenges me, and then I will find multiple ways of being able to implement that. Music is a language, right? How many of you all speak a language other than English? Great.
Spanish, Italian, French.
Okay. You're bragging now. Okay. What about you?
Spanish.
Spanish. Anybody else? You had your hand up, kind of? Spanish. Spanish, okay. All right. Yes. German, okay. Mr. Bass Drum. Okay. Ohio gozaimasu. Konnichiwa. Genki desu ka? Wanana desu ka? He's like, you better leave me alone. So I'm speaking to him in Japanese, right? Watashi wa nihongo skoshi deshimasu. So I just basically said I speak a little Japanese, right? But because you don't speak Japanese, we can't have a conversation. It's just like if you started speaking to, German, I'll be like, Inspector Dutch. I don't know what you're talking about. But if you understand the language, you can then do what? Have a conversation. I've been, I know I'm circling back. But again, how do we learn the language? Through listening, through dissecting, through transcribing, through stealing, if you will, right?
Or
I'm sorry?
like either that or borrowing.
Yeah, well, you don't really steal it. It's not like, I don't want you to leave here, go to 7-Eleven and take a Snickers and say, Carl told me I'm supposed to steal it.
Actually learning the language.
But see, here's the thing. We've been told for so long we should listen to records, and we should, but we've not been talked to about how to listen, right? And so one of the things, again, just talking about what we're dealing with today, some things that you should all listen for is the ride cymbal, the balance between the limbs. And again, without getting highly technical, because I realize maybe the levels are all over the place here today, it's just trying to focus on making it feel good, right? Working on your rudiments, working on time, being comfortable, hearing phrases and forms and so forth. So again, we talked about areas of focus. So there are 4 big questions I want to pose to you. What, when, how, and why. So the what is knowing what to play, how to get around the instrument to be able to do that, when are you actually going to play what you want to play, and why. In other words, does it make sense? A lot of times we have these things that we're working on in the practice room, and we're dead set, man, I've been working on this thing for 3.5 weeks, I'm playing this tonight. And when you do that, you basically said, I'm gonna insert this idea in the conversation, whether it's appropriate or not. So this is why it's so important to just always be listening, always be open, to be able to say and play something at the appropriate time. I'm gonna pause for a second just to see if there are any questions about anything. Excuse me, and then we'll get back into some other things, because I realize that, again, everybody's at different places and you guys have different questions and different concerns. So let's take a couple of questions.
I had a question about earlier, you were talking about when you're playing with somebody, thinking about their influences and stuff like that. So when you're playing, are you literally thinking like, oh, they sound like so-and-so, so I'm gonna do this, and you're not?
No. And that's just me. I'm not saying that you should or you shouldn't. I don't, but your ears will gravitate toward that naturally.
Okay.
Right? Like this is just me. Like I never say, okay, let me play this flammadiddle. It's just kind of what comes out. When I was in college, my director, who I still call my teacher, great bassist Rufus Reed, he used to always talk about the importance of listening and learning, and you just put it in your pocket, your reserve, and it'll come out when it needs to. Like I don't say, okay, this bass player plays behind the beat, so let me try to play like Elvin.
Yeah.
Your ears just gravitate towards that, right? So my approach when I play with someone for the first time is to try to make them comfortable. And if I feel like if I can make them comfortable, I can gain their trust. Then the next thing I do may not seem so nice, which is I'm gonna make them uncomfortable. Why do I make them uncomfortable? So they don't become complacent. One of the biggest challenges we have that I've noticed with younger musicians comes from a lack of focus and concentration. A lot of the exercises that I write for my students are designed purely for that, right? Because, we can work out of Chapin, we can work out of Wilcoxon, we can work out of the Cerrone, we can do all of that stuff, and that's great. But if you're not able to just focus and concentrate, and everything that I work on is designed to be transferable to the bandstand. And that's something that you all have to think about. Everything that you work at or you're practicing, as great as it might be, will it work when you're playing with other people, right? If not, how much value does it have, right? I'll give you an example. Some years ago, I was doing a residency at a school in California, and the director says, well, Carl, part of your schedule, you're gonna have to go to this club and hear our students play. Cool. So we go into the club, and they're on the last tune, and they're playing Have You Met Miss Jones? And it was clear that the drummer had no idea who Miss Jones was. I mean, he was chopping out. I mean, like, I keep saying one of the things that's ruined a whole generation of drummers, there was a thing at one point, I don't know if it's a thing anymore, called gospel chops.
Yeah.
And I said, they need to come out with Presbyterian chops. We need to dial that back a little bit. But this guy was playing all kind of stuff. He played the instrument well, but he was just all over the place. So afterwards he comes, Mr. Allen, it's an honor to meet you. I said, great, nice to meet you. Sing me, Have You Met Miss Jones? I said, no, it's not part of the melody. He had no idea. But what was he doing? Getting in the way, right? And from that perspective, I think it's a very selfish way of playing. I'm kind of a blue collar player, what I like to call a blue collar player, in the sense that my goal is to serve the music. My heroes, Art Blakey, Billy Higgins, Tony Williams, Elvin, Max, you keep going. They all serve the music. And when you get beyond that point, you now think you're hipper than the music, and I've not yet met anyone who's hipper than the music, including Disney. Right? So my goal every time is to be able to serve the music. It's not about me, it's about the music. Right? So to answer your question, I'm never thinking about it that way. In fact, I've even had people who I think were a little offended. They would say, well, what did you play on such and such a record? I don't know. Because first of all, I don't listen to records after I've done them if I can help it. And I'm not thinking about it that way. It was a moment that happened and it's gone. So, here's another really important question for you guys, and I'll take another question. How many of you guys get nervous when you play? Yeah, that's natural. Why? Why do you get nervous? Yeah. You don't want to mess up. Okay. So, I'm going to give you a secret just between me and you. Don't tell anybody. This is between me and you. Probably a lot of the people you're playing for, you probably never see them again. And if you mess up, if you play the best solo that's ever been played, how long does it last?
Like measure-wise?
Just length, a minute, a year, what? I don't know.
Yeah.
How long?
A minute.
A minute? Okay. Even if it's 10 minutes solo, right? Okay. If you play the worst that you've ever played, how long does that last?
Same amount of time.
Same amount of time. And the fortunate thing for me, I could be wrong. I've been blessed to play all over the world. I don't ever recall leaving a gig and seeing an ambulance and say, well, what happened? Somebody died. Well, how did they die? Well, crowd played better, they just died. Right? And so I say that to not say that we shouldn't have pride in how we play. But I say that because sometimes the fear of making a mistake becomes debilitating. And again, I reference Art Blakey all the time. And he used to say that a mistake is only a mistake if you don't know what to do with what you've done. And sometimes we make a mistake and we become paralyzed in that moment, and the music is still going and we're still stuck where we made the mistake, right? But my point is, if you're in the moment and you find something you do that you didn't like it, do something with it. I will tell you, probably a lot of what I played this morning, I made mistakes. But you don't know it because I found something to do with it. For instance, if I play, I'm like, oh, that's not good. So I'll repeat that idea, I'll develop that idea, and then suddenly it was a mistake. It was a discovery, right? So being in the moment, and again, thinking about how can you serve the music? How can you make it work within the conversations of the people that you're playing with, which is really important. But I'm also bringing up that point so that you guys will give yourselves permission to explore and not be bound by the fear of making a mistake. Because being bound by the fear of making a mistake is not going to make you better. It's going to hold you back, right? So I just really want you to, I want to give you permission to make a mistake. Life will continue. As long as you find something creative to do with that. That makes sense. All right? I got some other things I want to talk about, but let me get some other questions. Yes?
When playing swing, in what ways can I change up, should I change up my ride pattern instead of playing ding-a-ding the whole time?
There's something wrong with ding-a-ding the whole time? I'm just asking. You play drums, right? You got a stick bag with you? You do?
You said what?
You have a stick bag with you? Nobody got a stick bag with them? You got a stick bag with you? You put your hand up, come on, what's that? Just like, ooh. Now I said, do you got a stick bag? He's gonna pull sticks out of a backpack. That's not the same thing. All right. You get to live another day. All right. What's your name?
Colin.
What is it?
Colin.
Colin?
Yes.
Nice to meet you, Colin. Have a seat. Now, some of you young folks may not know who Red Fox was. Any of you guys know who Red Fox is? Older folks, y'all know who Red Fox was? Okay. I'm going to say something that Red Fox said, and I want you guys to remember this. It's to don't believe your lying eyes. What do I mean by that? These are actually DW drums. I don't care what it looks like on the logo. Don't believe your lion eyes. These are DWs, okay. So, play some time for me. Assessment of how it sounds.
Oh, me?
Mhm.
A little shaky.
I don't know what that means.
It means everything's not lining up with my right symbol.
Okay.
I'm trying to, yeah.
Now, you notice what his answer responded more to how it felt, not how it sounded. You guys notice that? So I said, how did it sound? Not how did it feel? Remember, that's two different things.
Yeah.
Okay, so give me an assessment of how it sounded.
How it sounded?
Wasn't thinking about that for a while.
Yeah, a little bit. Different sound.
So the very first thing I noticed that the hi-hat was not consistent in terms of the sound. So that's one of the things that you want to think about, because we haven't even started talking about the left hand yet, right? You've not started playing left hand.
No.
But I want you to make sure that these three things, the rise cymbal, hi-hat, and bass drum, feel good, because the left hand is just conversation. That's where the conversation is. All right, so let's try it again. Melody that you have in your head right now. See, a lot of times people say, well, sing happy birthday, but people usually sing it in three. You can do that in three if you want, but just sing happy birthday. I mean, it's any song, it don't matter, any standard. Okay.
Someone give me a standard.
Happy Miss Jones.
Huh?
Leaves. How about, all right, how you met Miss Jones?
I met her once before. She's a nice woman. That guy in California didn't know her, but no, I just, see, here's the thing, and this is something we'll talk about this afternoon. I keep talking about this because I want you guys to come back, because these are very specific things we'll deal with. We need to be able to hear the song you're playing.
Okay.
Without you verbatim playing the melody. You know, just like when I played It Don't Mean a Thing, I didn't always play every single note and rhythm of the melody.
Yeah.
But hopefully it was clear, as it was to this young man, that I was actually playing a song.
Yes.
You wanted to be clear of what song you're playing. And let me tell you why this is so important. One of the reasons why this is so important. And quite often, one of the things that I really get ticked off about, you know, if someone calls a tune, you look at the piano player, straight no chase. Bass player, straight no chase. Just swing. Okay. I'm getting up walking away. Because you're not asking me to participate in conversation, so why do I need to be there? Right? Tell me the song, just like and it's not just the 12-bar blues. You got to know the melody, because the way that I'm comping has to shape and support the rhythm of the melody, right? All right, so let me hear a little bit. Right now, I don't know what song you're playing, right? So one of the things I want us to do is to be really intentional. And again, there's a balance between kind of predetermining what you're going to play and then being in the moment, right?
Yeah.
But I want you to be very, very intentional about what you're playing. And so I need to hear you kind of shape and reference around that melody. Yeah, yeah. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. Okay, so right now, we're now in the second measure, and it sounds like it's still on an intro, because I don't hear left hand, right?
I thought you just wanted the three. Okay, my bad. I just wanted to stick with the ride.
I see the snare drum is lonely. You want to come to the party too?
Got you.
All right, 1, 2, Second, 1, 2, freaking out right now. He's got no idea why I keep stopping him. He's like, what's wrong with the bass drum? Why is he looking at who can tell me why I keep stopping him?
Okay. Focus.
Well, where is the focus? It's not settled yet. The music begins before you even touch the instrument. Why do I say that and how can I come up with this assessment? Because every single time he played, we heard a what? Pickup. Now, it's not like you're gonna get locked up for playing a pickup. Maybe in Pakistan, but right here, I don't think. But I have an issue with a pickup because quite often when drummers play pickups, it has nothing to do with what's to follow. And if I wanna be kind of anal about it, the pickup is an introduction. What purpose does an introduction serve? It sets up the storyline. But if we just play a pickup because it's just something to do, quite often it tells me that physically you're not settled, right? So you're trying to get settled, and once you get settled, then the left hand comes in, but the pickup is just something to do to kind of get started. So again, we talk about being intentional,
Yeah.
right? So again, if you play the pickup, make it feel like it's part of the story.
Okay.
All right? But here's the other thing, because this addresses part of your question that I saw that I'm a little concerned about. Let's try 8 bars of time and 8 bars of solo. Let's trade a little bit. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's trade some 5s. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Whoa! What's wrong?
Feeling it. I
No, it's not in 5, it's not in 4.
know. Feeling the phrasing.
Ah, ooh, okay. This is what I love. I love discoveries. So the first thing that concerned me was your grip. Because when you were playing, you were coming off the cymbal and it was really loose. And I knew that when we got to a faster tempo, it would be a challenge. Right? Now, I'm not saying this is what you have to do. I'm one person who believes it's good to maybe have one grip that's versatile. Instead of one grip on Tuesday, another one if it's snowing, and another one if I'm in Miami, and another, right? So the same grip I use when I'm playing slow, I use when I'm playing fast. But the thing is, if I'm playing, bringing the stick all the way back here, it's difficult to keep that tempo going.
Yeah.
Now, the other thing about the 5-bar trades, one of the reasons why I always give drummers and rhythm section players, well, everybody, these kinds of things, is because I'm trying to make you uncomfortable. There's that mean streak in me, right? Because most of us, when we're learning jazz language, we learn standards, and a lot of the standards are based on 4 and 8 bar phrases. And so we're really comfortable in 4 and 8 bar phrases. But now if someone throws a 5 at us, or 7, or 3, or 6, it's like, what? Right? Because if I gave you 5, the first thing that you're gonna do is to hear a 4-bar phrase and try to stretch it to 5. It'll never work. Right? So what's the solution? Text Queen. Yeah. There's only one text queen in here.
Oh, text queen. Right.
Yeah.
I can't hear well. Practice doing practice phrases, like odd bar phrases.
Oh, so the solution is what? You got to develop more vocabulary. Right? Easier said than done, but that's what you got to be able to do. Why is this important? So that we can do what? Meet the music where it is. Right? So again, to go back to your question, okay, let's give him a round of applause.
Yeah.
And I know we're almost out of time, but to talk about that ride symbol, my ride pattern changes depends on what's happening around me. And again, I'm always trying to meet the soloists where they are, and I'm also trying to figure out what part of the beat do they play on. Something we'll talk about this afternoon. There's 3 ways of time. It's behind the beat, which is not the same as dragging. It's down the middle, it's on top of the beat, which is not the same as rushing. So, I had a really great lesson through this experience producing this record by this wonderful tenor saxophonist named Frank West. Frank was primarily a big band guy, great tenor saxophonist. But when we did this record, I had never played with him before. And he had this high-pitched voice, and he told me, he says, listen, girl, let me tell you something, baby. You can do anything you want with them drums. They can sound like they're falling down the stairs. I don't care. When I'm that ride cymbal, I gotta hear ching, ching, ching. So what does that mean? That means that he wants, right? So all of my supposedly hipness went out the window. Because this happened in a period in my life where I'm feeling like, you know, I just need to hear, right? Boom, 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 ding, right? Because he wants to dance with that rock. Now, one of the things, and I'll try to end with this and take a few questions. One of the reasons why it's so important for you guys to be comfortable with different shapes of the ride cymbal, and then looking at the concept of the way the person is playing, is so that we can ultimately create that dance, right? And everybody's different. Years ago, when I was much younger, I used to think, you know, this is Elvin. Everybody's supposed to just play the way Elvin wants to play, because Elvin played Elvin. Art Blakey played Art Blakey. Higgins played Higgins. But the reality is that those guys played differently with different people. That was just part of the personality that came through in their playing. But I'm thinking, I didn't really get that, right? And so one of the things that I learned is how to create the conversation. Like some people would say, drummers should be in the driver's seat. Well, you know, sometimes I want to be driven. I don't always want to have to drive, right? And so there are some folks where, for instance, when I played with Freddie Hubbard, when I played with Michael Brecker, when I played with Jackie McLean, when I played with George Coleman, they like to feel like they're in a boxing match with the drums. It's a lot of conversation, right? When I played with Billy Taylor, when I played with Milt Jackson, when I played with some other folks, it's more. We just try to create a carpet ride for them to ride on. But it all goes back to serving the music, right? So again, I know this is supposedly geared toward high school and college age students, but I will say this to you guys. How many of you all are in high school? Any high school students? Great. How many of you all are looking to go to school to study music as a jazz major? Okay. How many of you all are looking to maybe go to grad school and you're going to be applying? Okay. So here's the thing I'm going to tell you. I am the endowed chair, director of jazz studies at UMKC in Kansas City. 2 years ago, I used to be at Juilliard. But I say this to say I listen to a lot of applications, a lot of submissions. And quite often, those that I don't accept is not because they don't play well, but they didn't do what was asked. They didn't play the song, right? If they ask you to play Autumn Leaves, make it clear that you know the song. Because one of the things we're listening for when you're on this side of the table is how well will you fit in with other people? How well will you play with other people, right? And I know that can be a little hard to kind of swallow because you just want to kind of do your thing and show who you can do, who you are and all that you can do. But you know, I'm always thinking about whatever it is you do, is it transferable to the bandstand? I made reference to that earlier. Everything you play, if it doesn't serve the music, well, okay, what's the value of that? It might be cool to do in the drum room or hanging out with your friends, but can you make it work on the bandstand? That's really what it comes down to, all right? Before we wrap up, see a few more questions? Yes, yes.
Earlier you were talking about developing an idea you might have thought originally you messed up on and taking the space to like develop it.
Mm-hmm.
And then you just mentioned you want to work on things that are transferable to the bandstand. Sometimes I have trouble blending those ideas in that it's hard for me to like navigate the like right space to work on an idea, or like, oh, you just went out of the form now. I feel like I have either I can like be very like non-musical, stick in the form, play stuff that's comfortable, or I can kind of step out of that and develop something and really make music, but then like we've lost where we are.
Yeah.
I struggle with that part. Do you have advice?
Yeah,
Or?
so here's the thing that we all have to be able to do. Always listen. Always, 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 always be listening to music. I've often said that every generation that comes, your level of responsibility in terms of the music that you have to know is more than the one that came before, in terms of generation, right? So I'm on this quest for us to try to update or give a facelift to jazz education, because we've been doing it for so long the same way, and we need to, it's time for some change, right? Do we need to know Rodgers and Hammerstein? Yeah. Do we need Rodgers and Hart, Cole Porter, Gershwin? Yeah. But you know what? Christian McBride, Benny Green, Josh Redman, we can go on and on. Roy Hargrove, Marlboro Miller, they've all written some great tunes. There's a tenor player that lives in Ohio now. If you see him, he's got this scraggly beard. You probably want to run away. He used to live in Utah. And he writes some great tunes too, named John Petrocelli. But if you see him, just run. He looks like Grizzly Adams. But learn people's music. When you learn people's music, it's going to help you be able to deal with all of that stuff that you're talking about, right? One of the things that I want to think has helped me to become employable is because I have a lot of different ways of approaching music. And I love it when people say, man, I never heard you play like that before. Yeah, well, you should probably check out my playlist on my phone. You'll probably see I'm not listening to Art Blakey all day, most of the days, but I got some Calvin Rogers in there too, dealing with some gospel. And then I got some Harvey Mason in there, and then I got some, you know what I mean? So at the core, it's playing the instrument well and just being open, because I don't know where the music is going to take me or where it should ask me to go. So, for instance, and I know I'm over time and I'm gonna apologize for that, but let me just say this. One of the things that really, really, really helped me in my early development, my very first long-term big gig was with Freddie Hubbard. And after being in the band for about a year, we're having lunch. And to kind of set this up, Freddie used to always talk to me about stuff. Not music so much, but money, clothes, girls, women, clothes, girls, money. So he would always be like, listen man, I better not see you when we go to Chicago. I better not see you hanging out. So when we get to Pittsburgh, you better not go hang. Okay, all right. So he was always trying to warn me about this stuff. So one day, we're sitting down, and we're just talking. He's eating a hot dog. I'll never forget it. I said, Freddie, I need to talk to you about something. He said, what? I said, I think I got a problem. He said, you got a problem? I said, yeah. He threw his hot dog down like, man, I told you to leave that girl alone. I said, man, it's not that kind of problem. Different kind of problem. He said, what's the problem? I said, man, I don't think I'm hearing the drums the way I'm supposed to hear the drums. He said, what do you mean? I said, well, when I hear what Art is doing and Max and Philly Joe, I said, but man, I want to do what you do more on the drums. And he fell out laughing. I'm like, man, I'm in trouble. And I said, what's wrong, huh? He said, man, I'm not laughing at you. I'm laughing because it reminds me of me. I said, what do you mean? He said, part of the tradition, when you first moved to New York, people are talking about you. They want to know who you sound like. He said, when I first moved to New York, there's this trumpet player from Indianapolis. Does he sound like Miles? No. Dizzy? No. Faster Barrel? No. Kenny Dorham? No. Freddie Webster? No. Clark Terry? No. He said he didn't sound like any trumpet players because he got all his ideas from saxophone players. Mm-hmm. And then after he had gotten there, he would go to these jam sessions at people's apartments, cribs. And it was Hank Mobley, Dexter, Wayne, Train, all of these people, right? Mostly saxophone players. And the bass player that was there quite often was Paul Chambers. And so, if you think about it, Freddie's lines, most trumpet players' lines are short. I'm not talking about how long the solos are, I'm talking about their lines. Freddie's lines are long like saxophone. I share this story with you because it changed my life. Because it gave me permission to explore what I was talking about before. To give you an idea, when you hear me play stuff like, I'm hearing trumpet. I'm hearing Freddie. I'm hearing, when I hear, I'm hearing Thelonious Monk. Because it's just music, right? So my point is, because I've allowed myself to think much broader than I had been thinking before, it allows me to be able to have conversations on different levels with different people to avoid that thing you're talking about, right? So if I'm playing with a tenor player that plays like Gene Ammons, I'm not gonna come in there bashing like he's Coltrane. You see? And so again, this is why I go back to the importance of listening all the time. All the time. All the time. Every time we play, we are making an informed decision. So the question is, what's informing your decision-making process? If you're not listening, you don't have a lot to draw from, right? Does that make sense? Okay, get one more question, because I got you guys over time, I'm sorry. Any more questions before we go? Yes?
Yeah, I'm just curious, you mentioned earlier you were talking about your warm-up, you might talk about that later?
Yeah, so we can talk about that a little bit later, but right now, I'll just say this. Warm-ups need to be personal. A lot of people, Mr. Robert Shipley here, and he and I have been talking, we've talked about Alan Dawson's rudimental ritual. How many of you guys do that? Rudimental ritual, okay. Great, why?
Because to master my rudiments as well as I can, but also it was suggested to me by other drummers.
Okay, so how many of you all transcribe? Okay, why?
Develop vocabulary, language, so that I can speak to the music, as you said.
Great answers. So, one of the most important questions that you can ask is why. Your why has to be important. Your why has to be personal. For instance, we talk about warm-ups, and I hear people say, why do you do when I say, why do you do the rudimental ritual? My teacher told me to. Great. So now you just got busy work. It's not personal, right? So when we start talking about warm-ups, your warm-ups have to be personal. They have to address your personal weaknesses. So we talk about areas of focus. Part of that has to be being acutely aware of what your strengths and weaknesses are, right? I don't think personally, some people might disagree, I don't think I need to work on that much, because I think it feels pretty good. But I think I probably should work more on that tempo, because if I have to take a solo for 7.5 measures without doubling, 7.5 minutes without doubling up, it might give me a problem, right? But I know what my weaknesses are. And so the why behind why we do what we do, and we transcribe, if it's just because someone told you to do it, is busy work. My why is so that I can, one, conceptually and technically understand the person that I'm studying, but then the why behind that is so that I can incorporate it into my own playing, and then my why behind that so that I can expand my vocabulary, and my why behind that so I can speak with different kinds of people on different levels. But it's personal. So my why doesn't have to be your why, right? So when you start talking about warm-ups, you gotta know what your weaknesses are. And your warm-ups need to address your weaknesses. The challenge is for many of us when we practice to our strengths and we ignore our weaknesses. We practice the stuff that makes us feel good because it's therapeutic and it's fun, and then we don't get on the gig. And so when I say, let's trade some fives, but many of us don't do that because we've not been asked to do that. But you start playing with some singer-songwriters and they got 5-bar phrases and they got 9, 13-bar phrases, then what do? You're trying to force that 8-bar phrase into it, it won't work, right? So all of us need to be acutely aware of what our weaknesses are, and we need to be purposeful in addressing those things. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Does that answer your question?
Thank you.
Okay. All right, so I know we're 12 minutes over time. I appreciate you guys coming out. Today at 2 o'clock, we're gonna talk about the relationship between the bass and the drums and how to make the music dance. We want all of you guys to come. How many of you all did not ask a question today? Can I just see your hands? Okay, there was more than that. Okay, I have pseudo-photographic memory, so let me see those hands again. Okay, great. So I'm just gonna tell you guys, I don't want you to feel threatened to hear about this, but I live between New York and Kansas City. And because I travel a lot, my wife is in New York. I have a Rottweiler and a pit bull, and my wife, I have to leave them in New York with her. And she don't like them. So when I travel and stuff like this, my schedule's not crazy. She makes them bring them with me. I can't leave them in the room or in the car. So the thing about it, it's great when people don't ask questions, because I bring them in a little later, and I say, you see that guy right there? He didn't ask a question. Go get your lunch. They'll, so for those of you all who didn't ask questions, you'll feed my dogs for a couple of days. How many of you all believe that? Hopefully not. All right. Yes.
You said that you had a photographic memory?
A little bit.
Okay, so we met a few years ago, and we hung out quite a bit, and you told me that you would never forget who I am. You know who I am?
Wait a minute, I've seen your picture before. Yeah, the post office, it's on the wall. I remember you. All right, thank you guys for coming. Thank you.